So, fellow garage tuner Kendall pointed out that I haven't really done much of an update lately on anything I'm working on. And he's got a good point. So I wanted to give a quick update on the crap that I'm doing and not doing. It is currently the last day of the year, December 31st, 24 here in Minnesota. And projects have been moving slowly due mainly to my laziness. That being said, things are moving a bit. I'm in the middle of something right now, which is why everything is a chaotic mess. But I've posted some pics on the Instagrams, the FD, since, I don't know, the last story I did of it. I threw a carbon fiber hood, carbon fiber vents, carbon fiber trunk on it, or hatch, I should say. I have to spend some time and align them all, but I think they all look pretty darn slick. I sold the SSR Type Cs and got a brand new set of 57, I always forget, CRs, I want to say, which I think look pretty slick. I got those because I wanted something to use until the TE37s got here. They've been on back order for a long time. I got the rears, and unfortunately one of the two rears is damaged in shipping, so I am currently dealing with that. Hopefully I can get that refunded, sent back, whatever, but the fronts are not scheduled to be done and shipped until February, which is fine because I can't take this thing on the road until it's going to be April or May, just because that's how things work out in Minnesota. I painted the front bumper. I think it turned out really well. I'm super excited. It could use a wet sand, a cut and buff, but I'm still really happy with it. It's not black anymore. After I do that, I'll mount it properly and align it with the body. It's far from perfect. I purchased upper and lower control arms for the FD here because the ones that are on it, the ball joint boots are all torn, and you can't replace just the ball joints. Thanks, Mazda. Appreciate that little design, design gift from you. I've also got new coils that are going on because the HKS coils that are on it are just freaking cooked. So making progress on this. This side, I've got the uppers and lowers on, which is great. I've cleaned up all the bolts associated with it. Took them to the wire wheel, got all the rust off, ran a tap and die through the nuts and bolts so they thread on nice and smooth as they should. These two little areas needed to be retapped because, whatever, China parts, things didn't get threaded on or tapped properly from the factory. So that bolts up nice now. This side, I just have to put the castlet in, cotter pin, torque, throw the coils on this side. I'm going to get to working on this side, but see, ooh, look at how shiny. Shiny and perfect. These are just so rusted and crusty and effed up that, some wire wheel time makes such a big difference. Anyway, off to the other side, to pull that side off, and wire wheel and tap and die those nuts and bolts so they can be all clean and not crappy and ready to rock. And then I'll swap out this guy and the lower. And then I've also got new ball joints that I've got to throw on. Sorry, tie rod ends. New tie rod ends for both sides because those boots are also just thrashed. I don't know if you can see very well, but they're all cut up and jacked up. So, 240 is still under a tarp from when I painted the bumper on the FD, but the engine is chilling over here on the stand. I need to throw the new cam in and then measure for push rods and get those push rods ordered. And then I believe I've got everything else to rebuild that engine and get it back together, at which point I will throw it in the 240 finally. I still want to have that 240 running before spring comes, because provided I don't get obliterated at taxes, I want to do slightly bigger single turbo on this guy because I know at least one, maybe 1.5 of my turbos are screwed up in here. The intake is all jiggity jacked. It's this poor car has so many problems. But everything we do gets it one step closer to better. So anyway, if I don't get rocked on taxes, single turbo, standalone ECU, and then I'll put that in, and I'm going to pull out the ABS system and just make it non-ABS because I prefer that. Progress. Just a quick before and after of what I'm doing for all these nuts and bolts. This one came off the upper control arm mount here, and it is very difficult to turn. There's a bunch of crud all gorked up in the threads. This one isn't as bad as some of the others, but it's still just a pain. So this is, yeah, I can't turn that by hand. This is before. Okay, wire wheeling complete. I got the majority of the rust off and everything, but the threads are still pretty jacked. I can't really get it past this point. So, tap and die. All right, and tapped and died the nut and bolt. And screws on now without any catching. Nice and smooth. So, yeah, doing that with all of them. It's a slow process, but it's great when they're done. And this is why I'm going through each bolt. Like, so many of them are just corroded to hell and stuck in there. Like, that's awful. And there we go. Wire wheeled and died. Much better. Sway bar end link. Nut and bolt. And here's the after. Oh, it's so satisfying. Goes on so smooth. Love it. Eccentric bolt number 1. And here's the after. Nice and clean. Oh, works so smooth. While I was staring at my car, while talking to my wife a second ago, I noticed that if you look at my... Hold on, focus please. There we go. That left bolt doesn't look terribly tight at all. So, you know, more awesomeness. Okay, so brand new control arms. Very nice and shiny with fresh bushings. Love it. The holes into which these M8 by 1.25 bolts thread to hold the brake line on the other side was bad too. It's just not great. So we continue. Yeah. So we continue our tapping journey. Holes through. Let's see how we do. Yeah. Much easier. If this was any other car, I'd probably just drive it in with an impact, but, you know, FD. Upper control arm, finger tightened in for now. I think I have to pull the top off to get the coil in and out, so I'm not going to clamp that guy down yet. Here's the other lower control arm bolt before. And eccentric bolt after. Still a little bit of rust that I couldn't quite get up next to that integrated washer, but everything else is much better. Delightful. All right, so I finished up getting the upper control arm in. I got the lower control arm, the other one off and in, and I got the coil kind of in place, but in doing so, I found out that there is this annoying space of about, it's kind of hard to see, but of about 1/8 of an inch here on the side between the coil, little, I don't know what you want to call it, the lower coil mount, and the side of the new control arm. And I don't know if it's because the control arm is a little bit wider or what the deal is. So I took a couple of washers that I had, and I drilled them out to be 12 mil, so they fit over the bolt. And then I kind of cut them out into shape so I should be able to slot them down in there and take up that slack. So I'll test that out here in a second. If it's too wide, then I'll just hit it with the grinder some more and thin it out. All right, I know it's hard to see, but that thing fit perfectly in there. And now there is zero side-to-side slop. Awesome. So if you have a FD and you buy some more lower control arms from Mevotech, and you decide to put Tane coils on there, I don't know if it's the coils, or if it's the control arms, or if you're just supposed to clamp it down so you bend the control arms. I don't know. But either way, make yourself some little shims. These are maybe, I don't know, 5-30 seconds. It's more than an eighth, maybe 5-30 seconds. Something like that, and they'll fit great. And if they don't fit great, then just take them to your grinder. Make them fit. All right, and I've got the suspension all up, except for the sway bar, which I'm going to do at the very end. Everything else is kind of finger tightened in. I will torque it according to spec here, but yeah, that's all looking great. I tell you what, I don't think I've ever spent time actually cleaning up every nut and bolt on a car that I've built. And if you clean them all up and run a tap and a die through the nuts and the bolts, I was able to finger tighten all these on. Like, every other coil install I've done, I've had to run it home with an impact because I was just too lazy. So much easier. It's weird. You'd think doing it the wrong way would make it easier, but it doesn't. All right, so I've got the passenger side coil on now. However, when trying to get the sway bar in, the sway bar end link hits up against this far wall. And so I'm taking a die grinder to it. Taking a die grinder, there we go, to it. And I'm grinding away a little bit at this wall to clearance it. And it fits now, but I want to give it just a little more clearance. Let's see if I can. It's a little hard to see. There's no good angle for you. There. There's some clearance, but not much. So I'm going to grind away a little bit more, and then I'll check the far side and go from there. I do need new sway bar end links, so I'll get those ordered. Yeah. One step forward, 2 steps back. Okay, so I ground away at this wall here, and now it fits, and it's not contacting. There's maybe 3/16 inches of space, which should be okay because in its current position, the control arm is almost perfectly level. So it's not going to push any more this way as the suspension compresses. It's going to start pulling this end link back. So that should be fine. I'll probably do the same thing on the other side. All right, now back to the driver's side. I did the same thing where I ground away and clearance this one. So it wasn't as bad for whatever reason. Perhaps the alignment's a little funky, who knows. But this one is now clearance, so it can get in there without issues. So that means the front, besides torquing it down, is done. No, I also hit this guy with a wire wheel, retapped it, and these two here, and the hold of the sway bar bushing, well, I don't know what you would call it there, retainer. Took those out, hit them with a wire wheel, and dyed them again because they were all rusted and crappy. Yeah. On to the back now. Well, I think I mentioned I was done with the front, and I'm not quite done with the front yet. I need to do the lower control arm. Sorry, the tie rod ends. There you go. My brain's not braining today. I got new tie rod ends for both sides because the boots on one of them was toast. Yeah, this one right here I think is toast. Other one as well, but that's all right. So I'll get those guys swapped out, and then besides torquing things down, I am done with the front. I'm going to back out the retaining nut here as far back as it'll go without, straining it. And then I'll measure the distance between the retaining nut and the tie rod end, and then take this one off, put the new one on. All right, I got this tie rod end off here, the outer tie rod end. Came off without many issues. If you ever work on imports, I don't know about American cars, I'm sure it's the same, but if you ever work on imports, you spend hours beating the crap out of your tie rod ends trying to get them off. And like just literal hours. And I picked up one of these guys, and it has been just night and day difference. It's amazing how things go when you have the right tools, but these guys get your tie rod ends off in just seconds. It's terrifying because it usually comes off with a loud bang and the thing shoots across the room pretty much, but this does the job really well. So got this tie rod end off. There's a lot of corrosion on the threads here, so like everything else, I ran a dye down it and clean up the threads. And now I'm going to throw the new one on. All right, got this side on. It's just kind of snugged up. I don't have it torqued down. But this side's good to go for now. On to the other side. All right, passenger side off. As you can see, a bunch of corrosion gunk in there. Gonna run a dye over it. All right, I have run the dye on this guy. As you can see, no more corrosion. I'm gonna put a little bit of anti-seize on the end here in hopes of it stopping this from corroding in the future. All right, passenger side, outer tie rod end on. I have to put the pin in, and I've got to torque everything down. Nothing's torqued, but next I'll begin working on the rear. All right, a couple days later, I came back out. I got the new sway bar end links on. You can kind of see them here. There we go. This side is right up against this lower control arm, and I figured out that the mount here, the sway bar mount, is bent, which is pushing the sway bar back. Which probably happened, of course it happened, in the accident the car was in long ago. So I might bend that back. I might try and find another one. Whatever, we'll see what happens. I also got little clips for the brake line here because I didn't have the clips. So that's great. Still have to torque and align. On to the back now. The FD's lower suspension mount here is interesting because it's integrated with the sway bar end link. So you've kind of got to take this off or take the sway bar off the chassis to pull it out when the time comes. So I'm working on that now. All right, got the sway bar end link off and the two bolts that hold on the sway bar thingamajoober. Gonna clean those up with the wire wheel. Okay, got all these cleaned up. They thread in by finger now, which is great. Some of you might be saying, but you're taking the zinc plating off. And well, the zinc plating was all rust and corrosion, so it was already off. At least now this kind of works again. Now to remove the coilover. I'm gonna take the upper bolts off. Okay, old coil removed. These guys are just toast. They really are blown. They're probably about 20 years old, these HKSs. But whatever. They're off. Upper bolts removed. I'm gonna clean these up. Put the new coil on. All right, upper coil mount bolts cleaned up, and the strut bar nut and bolt cleaned up. It was threading on kind of rough. Now, coilover goes in. Okay, new coilover on. I had to actually lift the caliper, lift the whole rear end assembly here to get it on, which is interesting. It tells me that these have a lot less sag than the other ones. Additionally, I know I've said it already, but cleaning up these top bolts here, these top nuts, makes them go on so smooth. Every other car I've done this to, I've had to crank them on. It's impossible to get them on finger tight because they're just so old and crusty. Running a tap through them just makes such a difference. I'll put the rear strut tower bar bolt back in after I finish that side there. Another day, more fun car work. Getting started on the rear passenger side today. Just like the other side, I'm going to take off the sway bar mount over here to allow this stuff to move around a bit easier. Pull this guy out, pull this guy off the sway bar, pull the coilover off, clean up all the nuts and bolts, slam it back together. All right, all the nuts and bolts cleaned up, rear coil mounted in place, rear sway bar mounted back in place, upper bolts all mounted in place. I'm going to go inside and make a cheat sheet for all the torque specs now. Come back out probably tomorrow or Tuesday sometime and get everything torqued to spec and aligned properly. Let me know if you guys like this style where I'm just more or less explaining the work than doing it and coming back, or if you'd prefer more of the work actually being done, seeing me sitting and wire wheeling 1,000 bolts for 10 hours. Okay, finished getting everything back together, torqued down upper bolts on both sides, torqued down the lower stuff in the back here, retorqued the sway bar down, sway bar end link, which holds the coil in, throwing the wheels and tires back on, and the rear is done, then onto the front. Right there, where Dave's pointing. Right there. Got everything in the front torqued down, got it back sitting on the ground. I gave it some default guess alignment. At this point, I'm just kind of tired. But the car's back together. It looks sexy as always. And I have, well, one good rear, one dinged up rear, but both of my fronts have arrived, which is awesome. You can see Dave pointed them. I have my new non-dinged up rear is on its way. Just reached the warehouse on Friday. So hopefully this week that'll show up. And hopefully FedEx doesn't Ace Ventura it all over my front porch again. If that happens, I'll get some tires on it, throw it on the car, and show you guys that. I'm super excited. But until I send it off to a shop to get aligned, I'm done with the suspension for now. I don't necessarily like the gap here. It's a little high, but I also haven't driven it yet because here in Minnesota, we've still got snow on the roads. And with snow comes salt, and my fun cars don't see salt. So I'll have to wait until like May, until the second or third good rain before I take it out. And then suspension will settle, and we'll see how it looks. If I got to lower it, I'll lower it. But I am really excited about this. Next, for this car, depends on tax season. If I don't get destroyed on taxes, then I'm going to order the turbo and the ECU and everything that goes along with that. If I do get destroyed on taxes, then it'll wait a little bit longer. I also picked up another car this last weekend, which I will tell you guys more about when it's not freezing cold outside. Hooray! But otherwise, thank you very much if you've stuck around for my not very exciting, but a lot of, I'm not going to say fun, but a fulfilling job here. And I will see you all with the next one.